Viewers, the RSS is marking its 100th year in existence. It's come a long way. Many people wrote it off. Many people actively maligned the organization. Some even, according to the Prime Minister of India, tried to quash its prospects at independence itself. Yet, the RSS is amongst us, it's growing, and it has evolved into the world's largest organization that serves society. One individual who has studied the RSS for decades altogether, written books about the RSS, US academic Walter Andersen joins us. Mr. Andersen, thank you very much for speaking with me. The RSS, as we know, founded 100 years ago. What unique conditions in colonial India gave rise to it? And how did those who led it shape its early structure and ideology?
Well, of course, what motivated it in the 1920s, because it was founded in 1925, was a sense of rising nationalism among Indians, and a sense that how could a large country with a proud history be dominated by another country. And it was that a similar thing, motivated Mahatma Gandhi and motivated the founders of the RSS and others as well. And a major figure here that one should keep in mind is Balibam Hedgewar, the founder of the RSS, who was a Maharashtrian. Actually, he was his family was living in Nagpur, but they were not from Nagpur. They originally came from somewhere else, but they were in a central Indian city, which had a sense of all India, relationship because of where they were located physically. And it was that led them to establish something like the RSS, because the thing that was behind it was Indians were too disorganized and therefore weakened by this sense of disorganization. And that disorganization occasionally led to groups that were, in fact, somewhat treasonous of the goal of an independent India. So their idea was to build an organization and make it fun, and that's the structure, an organization, that could train initially men, but I'll talk about it later. They actually got into education of women as well. But an organization that could train future leaders of the country to, one, declare its work for its independence, and second, create a sense of identity issues were quite important, a sense of that they were a nation. And so hence the nationalist orientation. It's that which really motivated it. And it was fortunate it had a person like Dr. Hedgewar to lead it, because he was very keen about structuring an organization that could last. But also, more importantly, in some ways, he had a kind of cocktail of values that I think were very appealing to Indians. It was a combination of kind of the growing patriotism, a sense of Hindu-ness. What does it mean to be a Hindu? Looking at some of the symbols of Hinduism from around the country, and a sense of building pride in being Indian at a time when the sense of pride was beginning to grow. So he was in some ways ahead of his time, but also reflecting his time.
Okay. Critics often point to the RSS sitting out of the freedom struggle. How do you assess that claim?
That's a very complicated issue. It did not directly take place in the struggle, though it indirectly did by pushing for independence and creating an ideological background of Indianness and independence. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi, even on a couple of occasions, visited RSS camps. He was impressed by the discipline that he saw, and also by the message that it was portraying. Its enemies have been, by and large, political, fearful that, at least in the early stages, it would develop into a political competitor to the Congress, which it didn't do initially, and then who were irritated, particularly on the far left. The communists were irritated by its sense of national pride.
Let me ask you, the RSS famously describes itself as a cultural rather than a political organization. In practice, has that distinction held over the decades?
That distinction was forced on it by the bans, the first ban being after the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, by a person who was not then a member of the RSS, so they tended to be blamed for it. He was a follower of the Hindu Mahasabha, and Veer Savarkar was his, in a sense, political guru. So in a sense, they had to, in fact, they were kind of forced by the Home Minister, Patel, who was somewhat sympathetic to what the RSS was trying to do. But they were forced to write a constitution which focused on culture. In fact, they have always had a political orientation. And it now becomes quite obvious, not only was the political orientation, but the party that's linked with them, with the Bharatiya Janata Party, needs them in many ways. And that was really reflected in the last national elections, when the head of the BJP, I not very wisely said they really didn't need the RSS. They could work on their own. Well, at that, many people in the RSS sat on their hands. And the results were not great. As you know, the BJP lost its majority. But soon after that, when the BJP quickly turned its orientation, and you had the state elections in Haryana, and there the RSS did do its typical thing of working for the BJP, canvassing and that sort of thing, helping to raise money for it. The BJP did quite well. In fact, beating expectations, it emerged again as the governing party in Haryana. Now, new elections are coming up. There's a whole set of elections coming up. And so far, the RSS, particularly Prime Minister Modi, has been very careful to keep the RSS on his side, even to the point of the Independence Day celebration, mentioning RSS for the first time in any of his speeches, saying that it was, an organization which was important for India for its development and growth. Then, for the first time, just recently visiting the RSS headquarters in Nagpur as well, which he hadn't done recently. So he made it quite obvious that he wants, the relationship to continue. And there is a kind of quasi-political orientation to that. And I should say one other thing. The RSS, with a few exceptions, has tended to be very careful not to make itself too obviously involved in the politics of the country. But we can go into the nuances of that in a few minutes, because but really, to a certain extent, its politics is required by the various affiliated organizations around the RSS. It has some 56 organizations that are affiliated to it, and that are led by and large by RSS full-timers. Those organizations address virtually every aspect of Indian life. Broadcasting, for example, it has an organization. It has one in schools. It has, in fact, India's largest non-government school system is affiliated with the RSS. It has the largest, labor union in India. It has the largest student group in India, which is now beginning to make international connections. It has the, most obviously to many people who are watching this program, it is linked to the governing party, the Bharatiya Janata Party. The Prime Minister himself was a former full-time worker, Pracharak, of the RSS, which, of course, he's making use of these days when he wants to make sure the relationship is amicable.
Right. So let me just quickly ask you this. What's the nature of the relationship over the years? Has it been at times at variance? Now, obviously, the BJP was formed in 1980. Before that, you had the BJS. What was the relationship with the BJS at that particular point in time?
Well, the founding of the party, it was founded by a number of politicians who were Hindu-oriented and unhappy with the way that the Congress in the country was going.
Yeah.
Now, the RSS had a choice in front of it. It was worried by the way the country was going as well. It could either turn itself into a political party, and hence we get back to your initial question about culture versus politics, or it could, back another party. It, by and large, had supportive of the Congress Party up to that point. to the first band. It would, and it's Hedgewar had, in fact, himself in the 20s and 30s been very active in the local Maharashtra Congress Party, but it decided not to turn itself into a party. It would sort of operate from the outside, and it consistently, in a sense, helped the Bharatiya Janata Sangh Party and then the Bharatiya Janata Party over the last 50, 60 years. So it has had linkages, but it's not been a political party, and it's been fairly careful in how it itself. It's been more focused on advancing the interests of its various affiliated groups. And now that the BJP is in power, and in 14 Indian states, it also is the governing party, either alone or with others. So it has, it has an impact on public policy, and to a certain extent, it is the lobbyist for those organizations.
Let me ask you, because if you look at its advocacy, the charge of majoritarianism is frequently leveled against the RSS. First of all, how do you assess that charge, number one? Number two, how does the organization reconcile its vision of cultural nationalism with India's pluralism, its multi-religious fabric? And thirdly, Hindutva, how does that fit in with the overarching concept propounded by Savarkar? And has it been reinterpreted in more pragmatic ways over time? So three basic aspects to this.
Well, starting at the end with Savarkar and his definition, Hedgewar admired Savarkar and often referred to him because Savarkar was focused on identity, that, we're all one. Fundamentally, as a nation, we're all one. And this is something that Savarkar, advocated. He wasn't the only one. There were others as well. Mahatma Gandhi, in fact, advocated that as well. But, as you mentioned, India is a very plural place. To get to your second point, is a very plural place. And the RSS has always accepted that pluralism. It's an essential aspect, in fact, of Hinduism. It's kind of unity in pluralism. And the RSS itself has, after its founding in Nagpur, and basically its founders were Maharashtrian Brahmins. It quickly extended from that base because those Maharashtrian Brahmins who, took leadership positions for the first 5-10 years had a broader sense of India, and they brought in many people from the outside in India. And the RSS has never thought of itself as a religious organization. It is not engaged in metaphysical issues like the afterlife, what happens, and that sort of thing. And it can't. Hindu is such a plural idea that, it would be foolish to try to take one aspect of that as something that is favored. Now, the RSS itself, at least since the time of Madhavraj Deoras, who was the third Sarsanchalik, it has been open to Muslims and Christians. And in fact, almost all, with the one exception, almost all of the affiliated organizations, including the party, have been opened to Muslims and Christians. And some of them have, assumed rather significant roles. For example, there have been some pracharaks who were Muslim, and one recently died. So it has looked at itself as a cultural organization which has political interest, to meld the two ideas you just noted.
So let me ask you this. How does the RSS then always get stuck with this label that it is Hindu nationalist and exclusivist?
Well, it always has been Hindu nationalist, but people forget, what does it mean by Hinduism? Hinduism, is a very broad concept. And it incorporates, a lot of different ideas. And so the notion in the RSS is that this is the essence of our culture, is that we have tried to reconcile diverse interests without favoring any particular one of them. Hence, it could be opened once, something that Deoras argued, that Muslims and Christians are by and large one of us. They're part of the family. They had sometimes they've been identified as kind of quasi-Nazi fascists. Well, one has to go back to what the Italian and German fascists wanted. They thought of themselves as a exclusive group, and everyone else was somehow a danger to the state. Whereas this is impossible in India to do that. Given the pluralism in India, you couldn't, and the RSS has not either.
My last question to you. What do you think is the RSS's greatest challenge going forward? Many people say it needs to win over the confidence of India's minorities. It also needs to transcend its male-dominated outlook, its sort of incipient patriarchy. That's what many people accuse it of. What do you think is the challenge according to you, if at all?
One is how to respond to the changes in India. It's a rapidly changing society. It is rapidly growing economically, and that is having its impact, is how to adjust to an India that's increasingly urban and middle class. And while establishing a base in rural India as well, because India is one of those developing countries which still maintains a large rural element in it. Many countries that develop, the rural population, moves en masse to the cities. This hasn't happened in India, and I don't think it's going to either. So it's got those challenges to meet in the future. It has, and this is where the past comes in terms of how it's developed. It's maintained firm leadership cadre, which has been somewhat forward-looking in terms of how to keep the organization strong. That's the organizational aspect of it.
Thank you, Mr. Andersen, for speaking to us. That was an enriching and enlightening conversation about the RSS from someone who has made a life out of studying the organization. Thank you.